Today we'll be talking about Sora no Woto, which is Sound of the Sky. Alright, at least one of you guys seen it. We'll be talking about this for a while. Now, this is billed as kind of a slice of life anime of an all-female cast of soldiers in a remote outpost, and the initial glimpse I got looks like this. Now, if you're like me, you were probably concerned that the show was going to turn out to be K-On, but with a thin veneer of soldier stuff to make it slightly different. I'm not the only one to think this way, and when the show was first coming out, the subbing groups generally referred to it as K-On Goes to War. Fortunately, this isn't what happened. Instead, the show turns out to be very different from this, as the show's setting quickly makes clear. The setting is, in fact, the post-apocalypse. Or, as I guess I should say, the post-post-apocalypse, as life in some civilization has recovered, but the level of technology is pretty far below the present. As the uniforms may have implied, the characters are soldiers, in this case the nation of Helvetia. And they actually do some soldiering in the show. They're a tank crew led by Felicia here, their commander, Rio and the new soldier Kanata, who we're kind of following around, their mechanic Noel, and Kuriho. Now, while the show could make the same mistakes that K-On does and just have the characters sit around and talk all day while sipping tea, it doesn't. Although they're not in active combat most of the time, they do still have work to do. This isn't to say the team doesn't have fun and enjoy each other's company, but it feels more like camaraderie. It doesn't fall into the trap of all fun all the time that makes so many of this type of show bland and samey. Everyone understands that they're living in a time after an enormous catastrophe, though, and that feeling gives the show a slight feeling of melancholy that sets it apart from any superficially similar show. Now I'm going to go into detail on all of these points, but suffice to say for now that Sora no Woto is not the fluffy, air-headed tea and cake fest that my first impression implied. So let's take a look at the world. As I mentioned, this is after an apocalyptic global war, and the current nations bear very little resemblance to those of today. The platoon is part of Helvetia, a nation that borders the Roman Empire. Now, despite the apocalypse, warfare is still pretty common, but the level of technology is much lower. The military has the best of what's left. There's no wireless, really, and the platoon has the only working phone in their entire city, shown here. The characters also comment that what we today would consider a normal-sized high school is far larger than even the school at the nation's capital, to give a sense of how few people are still around. You may have noticed that the phone book in this previous shot is in French. This isn't an anomaly. Due to the effects of the Great War and the small number of remaining people, many cultures and languages have been combined. For example, while everyone speaks Japanese, none of them can actually read Japanese text. They just kind of puzzle at them. Instead, all writing is in French, from shopping lists, to books, to maps, to orders. All written in what to my untrained eye looks like pretty decent French. While they may not be able to read full Japanese text, the custom of signing one's name with a stamp, however, has carried over, possibly from the church itself. A mixture of West and East with pews and stained glass, but also Shinto-style dress for the people that run it. The church also provides names for new babies and contains just enough knowledge of Japanese text to provide a little context for what you're naming your kid. The town they live in, meanwhile, has a very Spanish feel, with tile roofwork and sandstone coloration throughout. And there's a lot of really small details. A perfect example of how subtle the culture merging can be is this price tag. All prices in the show are in yen, but yen as they use it has fractions, like American money does today. Or this fortune. Apparently they perform Japanese-style paper fortune-telling using, of all things, American-style Chinese fortune cookies. And the Japanese symbols for the various types of luck have survived, but all the text is in French. What's amazing about the show is that these shots, the price tag and the fortunes, are throwaway shots, only lasting about a second, but with such detail put into it. It gives the world vibrancy, because it's clear how much thought was put into every shot. It's one of the neatest things the show does, especially because it is never explained by any character. They're all used to it, so it's left to you, the viewer, to pick up on these details. The show is also completely consistent. Even the smallest details, like this can of caramels, fit the world and makes the whole experience feel integrated and thought out in a way that a lot of shows don't. Then there's the art of the show. Almost all of the landscapes have a sort of detailed, hand-painted feel that really stand out. I'm going to take a little bit now and look at some of that, because it's pretty nice stuff. Yeah. Buildings also look great. They're going to put a ton of detail into them, like this really cool cliff-top building here, or the outside of buildings look cool. The insides are also similarly detailed, like this store here, which just has stuff everywhere. Many individual shots of items also look amazing. Like the stained glass shot here, shots of a tree they really focus in on. The characters also are pretty well drawn, both close-up and from far away. No matter how many people they put on screen, they're always moving around and doing stuff, and it always looks good. It appears that no expense was spared to make the show look consistent and consistently great. Then there's the town they live in. The characters often visit the nearby town and seas, and it is amazingly detailed. By the end of the show, you'll recognize landmarks and almost feel like you know your way around them. Due to all the detail putting into making it feel distinct, like a real place that people would live in. Like these people here. Oh, what a nice day. Now, in terms of making the city feel like a real living place, it doesn't hurt that it's based off of a real town, the town of Cuenca in Spain. It's clear the show's creators wanted their setting to feel real, and the research they put into a real-world town half the planet away from Japan has really paid off. I almost can't tell which of these are the right picture, the real picture. Of course, the town of the anime is not a carbon copy of Cuenca. There's tons of tiny details that flesh out the town, and the show is happy to show them to you often. It's the sort of attention to detail more animation should pick up on. And it's not all just random background stuff some artists threw in there either. They talk about what the purpose of these rooftop ornaments is, the fact that this statue here is modeled off of one of the archdukes of their country. As another example, at one point, the characters go to a nearby glassworks, shown here. Now, rather than just tell us the glass is made there, or just throw some barely researched images at us, I suspect instead that someone on the team either had a personal love of glassmaking or did a lot of research to be able to represent it accurately. Their work is worth it, as everything in these scenes looks authentic. It's a feeling you get throughout the show. Everything that was put in the show was put there deliberately, and put there so that it fits the rest of the show and looks correct. But enough about the visual aesthetic. I could go on for hours. On to the music, which is also a treat, so I'm going to kick this up a little bit. So I've been playing some of the show's back music up until now, but I want to highlight 3 tracks in particular. The first is this song, Cervantes de Few, which is played during a unique festival called the Town every year. You'll notice that the song is in French, which I felt was a pretty nice touch. I'll show some images from the festival's accompaniment instead of talking for a minute. The second song I want to show off is the opening theme song for the show, which is accompanied by absolutely gorgeous stylized art of the legend being told at that festival we just saw in the last couple of songs. Really neat stuff. The last song I'll mention, and the song that serves as a sort of informal theme song for the story told by the anime, is Amazing Grace, as performed by a single trumpet. The choice of this song helps to prove a feeling I've had about the anime. It may be made in Japan, but it's one of the most culturally open-minded anime I've ever seen. They do a really good job of it. But anyway, on to the characters. Let me turn this back down. After all, what is a show without good characters? From the always cheerful and somewhat klutzy Kanata here, to the strict but fair Rio, to the easily irritated quasi-tsundere Kureha, you might be concerned that the characters are just a collection of tropes. Fortunately, that isn't the case. While they'll have character archetypes you're going to be familiar with, like Noelle here, who seems like she's going to be some kind of Rei or Yuki Nagato clone, those archetypes serve as a jumping-off point for the characters in their development, rather than being a static definition that stays with them throughout the show. Let me give you a couple of examples. Take Kureha here. She may seem to be the easily irritated tsundere, but we learn that she's concerned about the unit's low status and remote placement because she yearns to live up to the example of her tank commander father, a father she's never even met. Or take Kanata, who appears to be the standard kind of cheerful idiot character, and she can't even play her instrument properly when she first arrives. Well, there's a good reason for that. The population in the show, as I mentioned, is so small that only the army even teaches how to use instruments anymore, because they don't have wireless communications. They need a way to signal other units from a distance. So it makes sense that she can't play, and she joins the military in order to get better. She also undergoes a lot of personal growth, and easily breaks out of the trope that she started out as. Also, spoilers, she learns how to make that bugle sing. The other characters are similar, though I don't have time to describe them all, so you're going to have to take my word for it. It also helps that being soldiers isn't just a costume change, but a lifestyle for the group that pervades all aspects of the show. They investigate problems as a team, go on training missions, help the townsfolk if there's natural disasters, study the art of soldiering, and even train together as a squad to pilot their tank. There's plenty of time for going to festivals, though, meeting the townsfolk, the fun stuff. Bonding as a unit over non-military matters. But it's not without drama. The show doesn't flinch away from portraying the harder parts of being a soldier, such as dealing with angry locals, like this kid here, or the kind of natural tension between the church and the military, and the direct effects of warfare, both physical and psychological. Now this gives me a good segue into the overall tone of the show. As I've described, the tone of any given episode can be anything from light comedy to drama. What's interesting is that behind all of that is a subtle but definitely present feeling of melancholy, because the characters are aware that they are living in a time after a great war collapsed their civilization. When a character asks about a figure of a dolphin and is informed that it was a creature that used to exist before the oceans died, that's a pretty heavy answer. It gives you a sense of what it's like to live there. When the characters troop out to the edge of a blasted wasteland, gazing out over remnants of cities on land on which nothing can grow, before acknowledging that it was humanity that caused it, it's a powerful and sobering moment. And that is where one of the show's great strengths lies, in its subtlety. None of the characters have a long, drawn-out speech telling the viewer what they should feel about this. The moment happens, and then is over. The characters move on and leave you to think of the implications. As another example, the show, in case you couldn't tell from the panel up until now, has a definite anti-war message. Again, this isn't done through big, dramatic speeches or by beating you over the head with a ham-handed message, but by showing in small ways the effect of war on places, on people, and through beautiful scenes like this one, which paper lanterns representing the deceased are set afloat on a river, including former comrades. Discussions between characters that touch on the realities of war, like torture, are matter of fact, rather than the ideals-laden screaming matches that so many anime are fond of. And then there's consistency. I wanted to mention how impressive the show's consistency is. Things happen in early episodes, like Noelle comforting Felicia here, that don't make sense until you as a viewer have information from later episodes. This is because the characters are pretty well realized and defined, and they do exactly what they should given the situation, even though you as a viewer don't have the context to understand why yet. This means the characters have been really thought through as people who react to things based on their personality, rather than just doing whatever the plot demands. It's something that I was impressed by many times during the show and gives it a very high rewatch value. As you'll notice, things that didn't make sense the first time around that do make sense in the second viewing. Now, I do have one disclaimer to give. There's a lot going for the show, and I'm going to recommend it to all of you. There's also very little fan service and other off-putting nonsense. However, I don't keep things from you, so there's an otherwise good episode in which Kanata, through an unlikely series of events, ends up peeing herself. It's weird, doesn't really fit with the rest of the show, and while played for laughs, still made me kind of feel uncomfortable. I'm not really sure why it's in the show, but it is, and now you've been warned. With that out of the way, let's recap. Sora Woto is a show with strong characters, a good premise that is executed well, carefully crafted art with a sense of place, great music, and a tone and message delivered subtly but brilliantly. So head off on an excursion with Sora Woto. Some details here. Thanks.